Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're going to fundamentally rethink the modern grind by doing something really fascinating. We're looking at how humans actually lived for the vast majority of our history. For about 300,000 years, our ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers. And honestly, when we look at the data from some of the last remaining groups on Earth, like the Hadza in Tanzania, it's going to completely shatter how you view your own daily schedule. So let's just dive right in. We're kicking things off with a pretty staggering number, 2.5. That's right, ancient humans worked just about 2.5 hours a day. The contrast here is just wild. Think about it. That tiny 2.5 hour sliver of time covered literally every single chore needed to keep them alive. Hunting, gathering, cooking, the whole shebang. Meanwhile, in our modern reality, most of us hit that 2.5 hour work milestone before we even take our lunch break. These ancient humans had no chronic diseases of the modern world, they were never told to be somewhere at a specific time, and researchers consistently report they actually look happier than we are. So, to understand what they did with all that remaining time, here is our roadmap for today. First, the 15-hour work week. 2, sunrise, the operating system. 3, mid-morning, food and grandmothers. 4, afternoon, rest and resolution. And finally, 5, the trades we made. All right, part 1, the 15-hour work week. Let's start with the baseline data that absolutely shocked the anthropological world. Back in 1968, an anthropologist named Richard Lee studied the Kung Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert. And he didn't just observe them casually, he tracked their time down to the absolute minute. His total? Just 15 hours of work per week? Your ancestors had no bosses, they paid absolutely zero rent, and they didn't even have weekends. Why? Well, because practically every single day was already mostly a weekend. Moving on to part 2, sunrise, the operating system. Put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine it's sunrise. You wake up on a highlight over flattened grass to the smell of a small fire. You own almost nothing, maybe a digging stick, a bow, or a few hides, and all of it fits in a single bag. But look at the social wealth around you. You're surrounded by 25 to 30 people. You know every single one of them, and you've known them your entire life. Your grandmother is sleeping just a few feet away from your kids. Nobody is on a clock here, so what actually happens in that first hour? Well, anthropologist Polly Wisner found that the first hours of the day are spent in casual conversation. But listen, this isn't just trivial gossip. This talking is literally the operating and legal system of the camp. It's how they figure out who told a good joke, who might be sick, or who maybe took a little more than their share yesterday. It's exactly how they maintain order and enforce equality without ever needing prisons. And that brings us to a really fascinating question and a brilliant story from 1969. Richard Lee, the anthropologist we just talked about, wanted to thank the Kung Bushmen for letting them live with them. So for Christmas, he went out and bought them the biggest, fattest ox he could find. But instead of celebrating, they ruthlessly made fun of his gift for weeks. They kept calling it skinny and terrible. So why mock such a great gift? Lee was incredibly confused until an old Kung man finally explained it to him. He said, "The bigger the kill, the harder they mock." That is how the Kung keep their hunters from thinking they are better than everyone else. You see, in their camp, no one is allowed to feel above anyone else. They use jokes, complaints, and whispers as these tiny, highly effective tools to cut giant egos down to size. They weren't being ungrateful, they were just treating Lee like one of their own great hunters. Let's look at part 3, mid-morning, food and grandmothers. By mid-morning, the camp gets to work. And this is where we see exactly how they feed themselves in that 15-hour window. The men head out for a dramatic hunt, using arrows tipped with desert rose sap. But as anthropologist Frank Marlowe found, hunting is highly unreliable. Men very often return empty-handed. So who's actually feeding the camp? It's the women. The women go out in groups and provide 60%, more than half of the camp's calories, through the steady, reliable gathering of roots and plants that doesn't depend on luck. And here is where it gets absolutely amazing. The most productive gatherers in the camp aren't the young 20-somethings. No, they are the women in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s, walking miles every single day. This perfectly illustrates what anthropologists call the grandmother hypothesis. It's the evolutionary theory explaining exactly why human females live decades past menopause, unlike other primates. Grandmothers feeding their grandchildren quite literally made our entire species more successful. And what about the kids during all this? Anthropologist David Lancy found that kids learn simply by watching and playing alongside the adults in mixed-age playgroups. At age 3, a child plays with a digging stick. By 6, they can find food on their own. By 8, a boy can take a bow out alone and bring back a bird. And by 10, they're contributing meaningfully to the family. All of this happens with rarely any adult interference. This is literally the school humans evolved to attend. Moving to part 4, afternoon, rest and resolution. So, the morning work is done. As we move into the afternoon, the focus shifts entirely. By midday, the first food returns to camp and is immediately distributed. Anthropologists believe this constant social arithmetic of generosity actually helped build the human brain. But the middle of the day is hot, right? So nobody works through the heat. Midday is exclusively for the body. They nap, they sit in the shade, weave baskets, and yes, they pick lice from each other's hair, which takes an hour and is really just an excuse to be physically close to the people they love. There's no shame around bodily functions or intimacy here. Now, they're human, not saints. Grudges, stolen tools, and jealousy definitely happen. But they have a highly effective process for conflict resolution. Step 1, a conflict arises. Step 2, because everything you own fits in one bag, you just pack up in 15 minutes. Step 3, you simply walk to another camp for a few weeks. And step 4, you return when the anger has finally cooled. The Bushmen call this voting with your feet. Just imagine being able to walk away from your problems for a month. Most of us definitely can't do that with a mortgage and a job. As the late afternoon cools down, the pace picks up again. They visit relatives in neighboring camps, keeping a network of hundreds of people connected, generation after generation. The hunters return, and if they're empty-handed, the women quietly become the day's heroes. Then the evening begins. The whole camp cooks together, roasting roots, boiling meat in pouches with hot stones, and chewing seeds to make them soft for the babies. They eat together as a whole camp, just as they have for 300,000 years. Which brings us to part 5, the trades we made. Because as beautiful as all of this sounds, we have to be honest about the reality of history. This wasn't a utopia. We got sick, they buried children, about 4 out of 10 died before age 5, and they fought and grieved. But they did not know the slow modern ache of working a job we don't believe in just to pay for a life that never quite arrives, or lying awake at night comparing ourselves to strangers. Because of this, in the late 1960s, anthropologists dubbed early humans the original affluent society, not because they had material wealth, but because they had an absolute, unimaginable abundance of time. The crucial point to take away here is that we made a massive trade. When we invented agriculture, we got some incredible wins: vaccines, antibiotics, longer lives, refrigeration, indoor plumbing, and drastically lower child mortality. Absolutely nobody is suggesting we go back. But we also got the costs. We invented work that someone else owns, we invented bosses, we invented bills, and we invented the 40-plus hour work week. So why does this matter to you right now? Because you inherited their bodies. You have the exact same nervous system as the person napping in the shade in Tanzania right now. Your body still desperately requires sun, sleep, physical touch, deep community conversation, and time spent doing genuinely nothing. We are still hunter-gatherers. We haven't evolved out of these biological needs in the blink of an eye since agriculture was invented. We've just built a modern world that completely ignores them, and we just stopped doing it. Which leaves us with one final, deeply personal question to ponder. Knowing what your body and your brain were actually built for over 300,000 years of history, what are you going to do with your remaining time today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helps you rethink your daily grind, and I will catch you next time.